Since 1967, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, showed what small and medium-sized countries can achieve when they work together.
ASEAN is a very important multilateral institution for Southeast Asian states. And in many of the capitals, they pay a lot of attention to it.
But the world is changing. The rules-based multilateral order is fading, and a new era of power politics may take its place.
The might makes right way of thinking is very much on America's mind.
Banding together could be all the more important for ASEAN states. But can ASEAN resist being pulled apart?
So without all these rules, it's like building a house without a foundation. The structure may stand, but it will not last very long. "60-year-old Murdamab has been living at a Cambodian displacement camp for the last 2 months. He had to leave his farm due to fighting in his area. Since May last year, tensions have mounted between Thailand and Cambodia, leading to 2 rounds of open conflict. It's the most significant altercation between ASEAN member states in decades, and a big test for the regional grouping's cohesion. Questions over ASEAN unity come at an inopportune time.
We are looking at a world where increasingly great powers are, exercising their power on a whim, right? And very ready to set aside international law if it doesn't suit them.
And for these small and medium-sized countries, a rule-based international law and multilateralism are very, very important to them. Because on its own, each of the countries are unlikely to have the weight to engage fully with all of these major powers. So it gives a collective resilience to ASEAN. It gives greater agency to the grouping by having all the 11 members together.
Although President Trump attended the ASEAN summit last October, the broader trajectory of US-ASEAN relations suggests a more limited American engagement in the region.
Southeast Asia is of a lesser priority to the US right now, considering that the US is preoccupied with many other regions, especially in its own hemisphere, and also, with NATO, Europe, and the Middle East.
Many years ago, a very astute US ambassador to Singapore once told me, in Washington, Southeast Asia is always a hard sell.
And if US decides to retreat or take steps, along that line, then it may portend an entirely new period. Southeast Asian countries would either try to band together more strongly, ASEAN as a whole, or they may also interact with other middle powers like Korea, Japan, Australia, maybe countries in Europe.
Instead, the Trump administration appears to prefer dealing with ASEAN countries bilaterally. For example, some ASEAN countries have negotiated trade deals on their own. Some argue this undermines the bloc's collective power.
Here's an opportunity for ASEAN to say, we are united, we will negotiate as needed together. ASEAN did none of that. The first thing that happened was that Vietnam's Secretary General, To Lam, called up Trump, showed that he had a personal relationship with the American president, and talked about how Vietnam was ready to follow the tariffs, but here were some things they might want to negotiate. This was a unilateral breakaway from what ASEAN might have done to reflect solidarity and centrality.
US Southeast Asia relations are becoming more transactional and short-term focused based on immediate gains rather than the past practice where the relations is built on a long-term partnership focused on values and norms.
This year, one issue could reveal the state of ASEAN solidarity: competing claims in the South China Sea. Julius Esihan is a fisherman who lives in northern Luzon of the Philippines. In the past, he would join fishing trips around the resource-rich Scarborough Shoal in groups. One trip would mean months at sea.
Sa Scarborough po kasi, nandyan na yung pinakamaraming isda. So, andyan na yung pinakamagagandang isda, simula sa malaki hanggang sa maliit. Bali po, ang isang sisidan po ng mga kasama namin, siguro yung isang karga ng light boat namin noon, mga 3 nights lang nilang pupunuin yan.
However, the Scarborough Shoal lies in a part of the South China Sea that's disputed between the Philippines and China. Tensions have flared in recent years.
Tinataboy kami na wag daw kami pupunta doon dahil teritoryo daw ng China. Sabi namin, hindi nyo pagmamayari ito. Dahil kahit kukunin natin sa mapa, nasa loob pa rin talaga ng lupa, sa loob pa rin talaga ng tubig ng Pilipinas. Kasi kung kukunin natin, simula dito, 147 miles lang. 700 plus yata sa kanila. So, paano nangyari yun? Hanggang sa, yun nga, naglagay na sila ng barko, tapos binubumba na nila ng tubig.
Since 2020, Julius has turned to fishing in the municipal waters of Masinloc Zambales, closer to shore. But his catch here is not nearly as bountiful.
Halimbawa, hindi panahon ng pusit, hindi panahon ng bunjingan, tiyaga-tiyaga din. Kahit nakisira 1,000, kinikita sa isang gabi, at least may pantawid gutom lang ang pamilya.
ASEAN member states and China are negotiating to finalize a legally binding code of conduct to manage maritime disputes in the contested South China Sea. Apart from China, 4 ASEAN countries, Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam, have made territorial claims to the waters.
ASEAN unity is very important for ASEAN to come up with a common position vis-a-vis China in the Code of Conduct negotiations. Without that, then of course it is very easy for China to divide and conquer and work individually with ASEAN member states to work towards the position that ASEAN wants.
Together, these 11 countries can have much bigger bargaining weight in dealing, in negotiating whether free trade agreements or negotiating an instrument to pacify, to stabilize a flashpoint like the South China Sea.
The South China Sea issue has long divided ASEAN, with some member states taking a firmer stance against China than others. This year, the Philippines assumes the rotating ASEAN chair from Malaysia.
We know that the Philippines and China, at least as far as the South China Sea is concerned, that aspect of the relationship has been rather shaky over the last couple of years.
And as chair of ASEAN, I think the Philippines, it's understandable that the South China Sea is very high in the country's agenda, but I think Manila should also be seen as an inclusive leader that will factor all the regional interests and priorities, including the resolution or at least the management or the return to normalcy of the relations between Thailand and Cambodia, given their ongoing border dispute.
As the superpowers assert their influence on the region, will ASEAN hold together?
ASEAN is a very important multilateral institution for Southeast Asian states. But at the same time, it is going to become increasingly difficult to manage our relationship with external powers, especially if the relationship, for example, between the US and China continues to become more competitive and to deteriorate.
As we are in the new world order now, we need to rethink the way that we do things. Do you need all 10 countries to actually agree on something before you can move forward? Are there no other better ways to go about doing this?
In the end, the challenges confronting ASEAN mirror those facing the rest of Asia, navigating the decline of a familiar world order and preparing for the one that follows.
We have witnessed the slow disintegration, fragmentation of the world order, and of course there are also ambitious powers, that are stepping up to provide leadership as they see a vacuum that can be filled. But at the same time, of course, the differences in terms of values, but also, lingering suspicions, mistrust, this will make for a more complex, more complicated world.
Unequal bilateralism is going to feature. We will need to get ready for a world where the level playing field is no longer on offer and elastic global demand is no longer available for the things we make. We need to build resilient structures on that.
Asia is a region that continues to grow economically. It continues to prosper. Looking ahead, it would be a bit more difficult where great powers are increasingly more assertive and very clearly trying to shape this emerging global order in their interests, if not in their image. The question for the rest of the world is how are we going to deal with this new environment that we are entering into?